Discover the power of one.
I've been asked to talk to you about the Islamic threat, and I want to break it down into a few different pieces. And, after we talked last night, I got a lot of questions from you all and a lot of comments. And so what I'm going to try and do is put this together in a way that hopefully makes sense to you. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to lay out what is it that the enemy wants, which is pretty clear. 100% of our enemy says they want, that they define themselves as Muslims waging jihad in the cause of Allah in order to establish a caliphate, a global Islamic state under Sharia. That's what they say. That's what Al-Qaeda says. ISIS says it. Boko Haram says it. Abu Sayyaf, the Muslim Brotherhood says it. Tablighi Jamaat says it. Nation states say it. And everybody that we either arrest, pick up on the battlefield, or is conducted an operation all say that's why they're doing what they're doing. Or if they were killed in the operation, we find out later that that's what they were doing, despite the fact the government says that they're mentally deranged and we can't find any motive. The motive is very clear. And people will ask, well, John, how do you know that? Well, because, as you see on the slide, they actually have rallies and they tell us what it is they want. They say it on TV. They say it in interviews. They put out literature. It's very clear. And so we see this all over. And for those of you, as Pastor Cowart was talking last night about what we're seeing overseas, and Jerry spoke about it too. You're seeing things like this. Sharia zones where Muslims patrol the area. And like this, you have Sharia police in Germany walking around. So if you are seen, it doesn't matter that you're not Muslim. If you're in an area that's controlled by the Muslims, and if you're a woman and your skirt is too short or you're drinking alcohol, they make you drop it. And people have been beat up in these countries because of it. That's what's going on. Osama bin Laden in this letter to the Taliban says we want Sharia and we want an Islamic system, a caliphate. Just like, right, the Prophet Muhammad said. We have ISIS. Everybody here knows what ISIS has publicly said. We want a caliphate, right, that follows Sharia law. And they established the Islamic State, and he's the caliph, Abu Baghdadi. Because this means something to us. If I leave you with one thing today, it's this whole war. It is all about Sharia. It's the blueprint for how they operate. It's what they want to impose on the world, on the entire world. And so we see it. We see the Muslim Brotherhood, right? And by the way, you see that this is their official logo, and the writing in yellow by the hilts of the two swords. In Arabic, it says, make ready or prepare. And it's a reference to Quran 8:60. Against them make ready the utmost of your strength, including steeds of war, to fight the enemies of Allah and your enemies. And if that's all you knew about the Muslim Brotherhood, do you think they should be the organization that we're using to be a liaison between the federal government and the Muslim community in America? But we are. And what do they say in their official English language bylaws? Well, they say we're an international Muslim body which seeks to establish Allah's law in the land, the Sharia. And they go on to say, and, oh, by the way, the Islamic nation must be fully prepared to fight the enemies of Allah as a prelude to establishing the Islamic State. That's in their bylaws, which, of course, after the 2011 Islamic Revolution, they pulled off their website, but we have screen captures of it at understandingthethreat.com on our resources page so you can get it. But that's who they are. And Muslims who are committing jihad, not terrorism, jihad in the name of Allah, they say it. The Times Square bomber, Faisal Shahzad, goes into federal court and is being sentenced, and the judge says, would you like to say anything? And he says, oh, yes, I would. And if you've never read his entire statement, I would encourage it. But for the purposes of this presentation, he said, if I'm given 1,000 lives, I will sacrifice them all for the sake of Allah, fighting this cause, defending our lands, making the word of Allah supreme over any religion or system. We Muslims don't abide by human-made laws because they're always corrupt. I say to them, we don't accept your democracy and your freedom because we already have Sharia law and freedom. And again, if you want to understand English when they speak, you need to use the filter of Sharia. Freedom to them means freedom from man-made laws. So when you hear them use words like freedom and justice, it's justice under Sharia, not as you understand it. When they say terrorism, you have to understand it how Islam defines it. And in Islam, terrorism is killing a Muslim without right. And Sharia specifically says when Muslims can be killed. When Muslims kill other Muslims without right, they can be killed. When they apostatize from Islam, when they can be killed. A parent can kill their child or grandchild for any reason, and there's no indemnity for that. But other than that, that's it. So from their perspective, American soldiers are terrorists. But they're using their filter. It's all about Sharia. And Faisal Shahzad goes on to say, right? The defeat of the U.S. is imminent and will happen in the near future, God willing, which will only give rise to the much-awaited Muslim caliphate, which is the only true world order. Isn't it interesting that he sounds just like ISIS and Al-Qaeda and the Muslim Brotherhood and Abu Sayyaf and Boko Haram and Hamas and Hezbollah, all terrorist groups, yet they all have the same objective. Isn't it interesting, and please let this sink in, that all the Muslims that we're dealing with get their version of Islam wrong in the exact same way? They must all go to a school that teaches them how to pervert Islam in the exact same way. Or maybe they're not. And finally, Faisal Shahzad said, brace yourselves because the war with the Muslims has just begun. Consider me only the first droplet of the flood that will follow me. And when you understand their global strategy, you'll understand what's going on. I get questioned a lot. Why aren't there more attacks in America and even in Europe? Seems like there are a lot, but you would think there would be more. And I would say, well, the question tells me you don't know what's going on. You understand the global Islamic movement, which is what they call themselves, by the way, which includes all the parts of the movement. The OIC, which Kamal talked about last night, the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, which is made up of all 57 Islamic states, 57 states. Yeah, let that sink in. Anyway, it's 56 states plus Palestine. And they have said, officially in legal documents served to the United Nations, that when we say human rights, we mean the imposition of Sharia, because that's the only way we understand human rights. And then they put out their 10-year plan in 2005. This is the head of state and king of every Islamic nation on the planet. And they said, our 10-year plan, we want to spread human rights in the world. Well, 12 years prior, they already officially served the Cairo Declaration to the UN saying human rights means Sharia. So they don't have, legally they're on solid ground. They've done their work. How many people at the State Department do you think understand that? It's a number between 0 and 0.0, okay? That's the problem. But that's where we are. It's all about Sharia. So you've got the OIC, you've got violent jihadi groups like Al-Qaeda and ISIS and many others. Then you've got the elements that work in societies, the whole movement led by the Muslim Brotherhood, subverting governments, what they call civilization jihad, which we'll get to in a minute, right? So if they all say that they want Sharia, the question professionally we should have asked after 9/11 is, what exactly is Sharia? And by the way, our warfighting doctrine says that when we fight an enemy and we analyze an enemy, we begin with who they say they are. That's where we begin. But since 9/11, we have not done that. We have not done that, because had we actually looked at Sharia and said, what does it actually say? Well, I guess I'll just share it in this way. I talked to a 4-star Marine Corps general a few years ago, and I said, "Sir, what would you say if I told you that Al-Qaeda has never misquoted or misused Islamic law? When they've quoted it, they've been right." And he looked at me and said, "That would completely change the nature of the way we're fighting this war." And yet we still haven't adjusted. Because as we're told by Mrs. Clinton, Mr. Kerry, Mr. Obama, President Bush, this has nothing to do with Islam. Nothing. So let's actually look at what Islam is. Where does Sharia come from? Sharia comes from 2 sources. Anybody know? The Quran and? Okay, Kamal had to answer that one. Really? That's kind of cheating. The Sunnah, the example of the Prophet Muhammad, what he said, what he did. If it is authoritative that he actually said or did it, it's good for all times. Excuse me. So, the Sunnah, we have something called the Hadith, which are those recordings of what he said and did, and the Sirah, his authoritative biographies. And since we're limited in time, I just want to kind of cut to the chase. First, the Quran. In Islam, it's considered the uncreated word of God. It is all directly from Allah, but the Quran is 114 chapters or surahs that are not arranged in any order particularly. It's not chronological. The first surah or chapter has just 7 verses in it. It's very small. 2 is the largest, and it generally gets smaller until 114, but that's not even a good rule. But in Islam, the Quran, and if it's in the Quran, who said it? Allah said it. Their God said it. Can never be changed. Capital crime in Islam to suggest that anything in the Quran is incorrect. So, the Quran says twice, 16:101 and 2:106, that whatever comes last overrules what came earlier chronologically. We've revealed it in stages. Muhammad was in Mecca. In 13 years in Mecca, no jihad, he converted about 150 people. 6 or 7 in the first 8 years. Then he goes to Medina, becomes a political military ruler. Oh, now we got jihad. Defensive jihad, limited offensive jihad, and then the permanent command for jihad until the entire world is under Islamic rule. So if you put the chapters of the Quran chronologically, it looks like this. And you see the ones that were revealed to Muhammad begin with Surah 2, chapter 2, over there in the right-hand column, if you can see it. You get something like, let there be no compulsion in religion. That sounds very nice. Except because it says that, later you have, but whoever seeks a religion other than Islam will never have it accepted of him, and he fails in the hereafter, which means he goes to hell. So there's no compulsion in religion, but if you're not a Muslim, you go to hell. So one of the things I shared last night that's important to understand is they don't believe that any of the Bibles we have today are historically accurate at all. As I said last night, throw archaeology, historical, the historicity of the Bible, throw that all out the window because it's their story, not yours. But the reality is, whatever comes last overrules. So if you're not a Muslim, you go to hell because, look, we gave the law to Moses. Allah gave the law to Moses. Allah gave the evangel to Jesus. They all predicted the coming of Muhammad and that Allah is the one true God. And then Muhammad came. So if you're not a Muslim, by the time Muhammad came, you're lost. You go to hell. And as we said we'll get to it right now. So that's why the Quran, which comes from Allah, the last word in the Quran about relations between Muslims and non-Muslims, take not the Jews and Christians for your friends and protectors. They are but friends and protectors of one another. And you that does that, you're among them, which means you go to hell too. You are kufr. You're an unbeliever. You are the mushrikin. You're outside of the bounds of Islam. You want to know why Al-Qaeda and other organizations, when they do these spectacular attacks? Because they want people off the fence. They just want to know, whose camp are you in? The unbelievers or the believers? Right now, the entire strategy in the global war is focused on the Muslim community. That's why we're not seeing more attacks here. You're watching attacks, individual jihad in the United States and Europe. They're focused on the Muslim community to get them to adhere to Sharia. But they say this year and moving into 2017 is when they start to make the turn and focus on the West. And you will see very significant changes in what you're seeing on the news and in the world when they do that. Well, how does this apply? Well, it applies because, right, they say whoever seeks religion other than Islam will never have it accepted of them, which of course leads to fight and slay the unbelievers wherever you find them, and lie and wait for them in every stratagem of war. For pagans, convert or die. And for people of the book, Jews, Christians, Zoroastrians, fight those who believe not in Allah or the last day, even if they're people of the book, until they pay the jizya, the non-Muslim poll tax, with willing submission and feel themselves subdued. They submit to Islamic law, they become dhimmi, and they pay the non-Muslim poll tax. 3 options. In Islam, they do not believe in forceful conversion. They are giving you options. First, they invite you to Islam. Hey, it's their rules. They invite you into the social order of Islam to submit to Islam and pay the jizya, or you die. So you can see someone with a gun up against their head. They don't consider that forceful because they're giving you a choice and you have the freedom to choose. Now, how does that matter? How many of you even know what a tafsir is? Raise your hands. Okay, for those of you watching at home, 0 hands just went up. The tafsir legally defines every verse in the Quran because this is a legal system. Leaders in the Islamic community are not pastors, priests, and rabbis. They are jurists. They are lawyers, legal scholars, qadi judges, because Islam is a totalitarian system governed by Sharia. In children's textbooks in elementary and junior high school, they say Islam is a complete way of life, social, cultural, military, political, and religious, all governed by Sharia. And 100% of Sharia obliges jihad until the entire world is submitted to Islam, to the Sharia. There's no other version of Islam. I wrote an article about 5 weeks ago. No, it's actually more than that, two months ago or so, asking where is this mystical, peaceful version of Islam taught that I keep hearing about from our leaders. I'm just asking the question, can you name one Islamic school on the planet that teaches it? And why am I so confident? Here's why. Because it's a capital crime in Islam for a Muslim to teach another Muslim anything about the Quran or the Sunnah that's not true. So of course they have to teach children that jihad is obligatory when they're old enough, and that Jews and Christians must be hated and despised for the sake of Allah, because that's what it is. Hey, Kamal, you just stop me if I'm saying anything that's not true up here, right? We've had these discussions. This is what he was taught. It's what all Muslims are taught. Now, are there Muslims out there that don't want to live under Sharia? Well, of course, because it's totally contrary to human nature. Absolutely. So that's when you see these wanes in history over the centuries, when Muslims drift away from Sharia, those aren't different versions of Islam. Those are human beings who don't want to live and be enslaved by a system like this that uses brutal violence and savage behavior to ensure people remain in the system. Islam requires somebody who comes into Islam, if you're not born into Islam, they do not tell them what Islam is all about because it was revealed progressively over 23 years to Muhammad. So they just get them to understand enough to get them to say yes, say the Shahada, right? There's no God but God, Muhammad is his messenger, and now you're a Muslim. And then as they learn, they realize, well, I don't actually get to leave anymore because it's a capital crime to leave Islam. You see how that works? So back to the tafsir. If we go back to that verse we just said, 9:5, fight and slay the unbeliever wherever you find them. And you were to say, well, John, that's not clear enough for me. I'm not sure what that means. Well, I'm not sure what you're smoking, but at least we can go into the tafsir. And for those of you who can't see this, when it says fight the mushrikin, the unbeliever wherever you find them, it means legally on the earth in general. Okay? And when it says, and capture them, it means executing some and keeping some as prisoner, legally, because this is a legal system. And when it says, and besiege them and lie in wait for them in each and every ambush, it means this: do not wait until you find them, rather seek and besiege them in their areas and forts, gather intelligence about them in the various roads and fairways. So what is made wide looks ever smaller to them. This way they will have no choice but to die or embrace Islam. Tafsir like this is taught right here in your Islamic Society of Colorado Springs. Go to their calendar, find out what they're doing, and they have weekly tafsir classes, because this matters, because this tells them what each verse of the Quran means legally. Do you see that? And we know that Muhammad is the Insan al-Kamil, the perfect example of a man. You might be asking, John, how do you know that? Well, because it says it in the Quran. Muhammad stands as an exalted standard of character. You have indeed in the message of Allah a beautiful pattern of conduct. So why do Muslims step their right foot into the mosque? Because Muhammad did. Why don't males wear gold in Islam? Because Muhammad forbid it. Why can a 60-year-old Muslim male marry a 7-year-old girl and it's lawful? Because Muhammad married a 6-year-old and consummated the relationship when she was 9. Why is it okay to do all the behavior you're seeing? When you are seeing Al-Qaeda and ISIS right now in their behavior of setting people on fire and drowning them and crucifying them, it's because Allah said so. He said it's okay, and Muhammad was the example. Crucifixion, beheadings, amputations, stonings, and whippings are part of the hudud, which comes right out of the Quran from Allah, not made up by somebody. When you see ISIS, you are seeing the armies of Muhammad. That's what you're seeing. And in the most authoritative hadith that exists in Islam, Bukhari, which, by the way, is described, all Muslim scholars agree, Bukhari is the most authentic and reliable book after the book of Allah, the Quran. And in Bukhari, Muhammad says the hour of judgment will not come until Muslims fight and the Jews and kill them. It will not come until Jews hide behind the rocks and trees and rocks will cry out, "O Muslim, there's a Jew behind me, come and kill him." Can this be the same God who says these are my chosen people? Those of you that are still wondering, this is like Logic 101. Cannot be the same God. In Bukhari, Muhammad says, by him in whose hands my soul is, the son of Mary, Jesus, Isa, will shortly descend among you people, Muslims, and will break the cross and cast all Christians into hell for not converting to Islam, will kill the pig, will slaughter all the Jews, and will abolish the jizya, the non-Muslim poll tax, because there's no need for it anymore. Does that sound like the same Jesus of Scripture? Can that be the same God who says, this is my son in whom I'm well pleased? Now go kill all the Jews and cast all your brothers into hell? Do you see, this doesn't need to be a theology class. This is Logic 101. And Muhammad himself said, I've been commanded to fight until they testify there's no God but Allah. And then he went out and he fought. And he did it. That is the truth. And even in the textbooks, what do they say? The basis of the legal and political system is the Sharia law. In the most popular junior high school textbook in the entire United States for Islamic schools, the law of the land is the Sharia of Allah. And actually, in the back of the book where they have the study of the Islamic State, it says the duty of the Muslim citizen is to be obedient to the Islamic State. Taught here in the United States in English in Islamic schools all over the country. In the largest terrorism financing and Hamas trial in American history, the Holy Land Foundation, Dallas 2008, the 15-year FBI investigation revealed that there is a massive Muslim Brotherhood network here whose stated objective is civilization jihad, to overthrow the U.S. government and impose an Islamic State, which is exactly what Allah commanded, exactly what Muhammad said, exactly what Muhammad did, and exactly what Muslims have done throughout history. Let me be clear, all of the prominent Islamic organizations in the United States are part of that movement. I challenge you to find one that is in the prominent, out there in the media, well respected, that is not a part of this movement. That, my friends, is the problem. The Muslim Brotherhood controls easily 80 to 85% of the over 2,400 Islamic centers in all 50 states and all the prominent organizations. As I said last night, the Islamic Society of North America is the umbrella organization for all the big groups here. It's Muslim Brotherhood. It was identified in that trial as being a financial supporter of Hamas. And the Islamic Society of Colorado Springs is a subsidiary of that, and its property is owned by the North American Islamic Trust, also identified in the trial as a member of the U.S. Muslim Brotherhood and a financial supporter directly to Hamas, a designated terrorist organization. When Christian organizations do interfaith dialogue and outreach, 100% across the United States where Muslims involved are being driven by leaders of the Muslim Brotherhood movement. So when I see pictures on the internet of, like in Denver, I don't know, was it 20, pastors coming together to go to a mosque and everyone's laughing and smiling in the picture, the people that are truly laughing is the other side. This kind of gross ignorance. We're called to love our enemies, but if somebody can, I'm not a theologian, but I don't remember Jesus commanding us to be morons. And he also never said, bring the wolf into the pen with the sheep and tell the sheep that that's another sheep. That's the reality. Yes, we are called to love our enemies and we're called to speak the truth in love. But that also means the truth always offends those who don't have it. And as I said last night, the most important people group in this country because of the nature of this threat are sheriffs and pastors. And we need pastors who are going to be leaders, boldly speaking the truth and courageously doing it. I thank Pastor Cowart for having me. I thank you all for listening because you have in him a courageous man who's not afraid to do what's right. So thank you very much. Bless you.